Welcome everybody to today's Governance and Transparency Committee meeting. All members of committee are in attendance. We'll start with the acknowledgement of country. Ipswich City Council respectfully acknowledges the traditional owners as custodians of the land upon which we meet. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging as the keepers of the traditions, cultures and stories of a proud people. Do any councillors have a declaration of interest this morning? Councillor Johnnick?
In accordance with Section 150 EM of the Local Government Act 2009, I, Councillor Johnnick, inform the meeting that I have a prescribed conflict of interest in item 8, titled Procurement Contract for Food Organics, Green Organics. The nature of the prescribed conflict of interest is that Remondis are listed as having submitted a tender. However, in comments under tender rankings, it states they declined to submit a tender. My relationship with Remondis is that two of my brothers are employees. As a prescribed conflict of interest, I will leave the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Johnnick. Are there any further declarations of interest? We'll move on to today's first matter, the confirmation of minutes of the Governance and Transparency Committee of 1 December 2021. Do any members of the committee wish to move that? Moved by Councillor Doyle, seconded by Councillor Milligan. Any comments or discussion? All right, I'll put that to the vote that the minutes be accepted and confirmed. Those in favour? That's unanimous and carried. First officer's report for today is the Quarter 2 Operational Plan 2021-2022 quarterly performance. Do any members of the committee have questions? Mayor Harding.
I have questions about Ipswich Waste Service.
Call on the relevant officer.
David McAllister, Acting Environment Sustainability Manager.
Through the Chair, thank you, Mr McAllister. Thank you for the report here. And I know that there's a lot of moving parts in our waste portfolio as we, I think, making a generational change. I do look at page 55 of my report, which I'm not sure what that is in the performance report, but there does seem to be an overspend year to date so far. Would you like to elaborate on that?
We are experiencing a significant growth potentially in our disposal costs. As Council's aware, with the closure of New Chum to us with Cleanaway, that significantly increased our disposal costs, and we are seeing a continual progression of those landfill price increases, and the recent non-putrescible contract also saw a very significant price increase. This is a market trend that all waste providers or councils are experiencing, and something that unfortunately is quite out of our control, because these are external landfills or external processing sources that we have to deal with.
So it's over $1 million. Is it mainly with the red top bins when you talk about landfill, or is it across the
excuse me,
the recycling and the
recycling? We are, and I can't go into that too much at the moment because we're in the middle of a tender process just to finalise that process. But again, recycling in general is experiencing cost increases, and across the board, everything from logistics to vehicles to fleet is from a COVID point of view. Overarchingly, also the city experiences continual growth, and that growth is decent, should we say, from an operational point of view. But what we are experiencing is a cost increase just to operate. Curbside large items, for example, came in significantly above the budget expectation from a tender process point of view, and that will flow through the back half of this year as well.
Okay. Thank you. And Mr McAllister, on page 52, there's a comment there. Performance is below target standard due to the impacts of COVID-19 and the Ipswich Waste Service staffing combined with a significant increase in number of customer requests for replacement and repairs. Would you mind explaining that a little bit further?
Multiple impacts again on the operation, both from just sheer staff numbers. We've had an ongoing flow of COVID, and we've had the aspects of even bin supply. So Sulo, our primary bin supplier, has experienced interruptions, for want of a better term. And we've also experienced a very large growth in the take-up of things like organic services. So when you compile all together, and Christmas is also the heaviest period of work for the team, from weights of bins, just sheer people ordering services. So it's been a challenging last few months in terms of operation.
And I guess when I look at the figures here, things to be sort of meeting our acceptable standard. There was a significant dip in November, so I'm guessing that's when the really hit.
Can I ask Mary specifically which one you're looking at? I don't have that in front of me.
Achieve operational excellence, be a good neighbour,
Okay.
those particular ones.
I don't have the specifics in front of me for that at the moment. I'm happy to come back if we can add more clarity.
One, I guess in particular, domestic refuse and recycling service commencements action within 5 working days of notification.
So that one specifically relates to, as I said, I lost my actual, I basically carry 2 individuals that do the bin supply. He went down with COVID for quite badly he was off for at least 20 days.
Okay.
So that impacted our service delivery.
Okay, that would be the...
compounding on the fact of bin supply and everything else. So
Okay.
The team have worked multiple weekends for the last few weeks to catch up on those orders. And again, Christmas is the busiest time for organic orders coming in. Something like the team said to me, 80% of all requests over the last few weeks have been for FOGO bins.
Okay.
So that's over and on top of growth. So that's quite a lot.
Okay. I guess my question is, how are you going to manage this going forward?
So 2 things. He's back working, which is good. We have quite a few jobs on the board at the moment for new team members, quite a lot of drivers, driver trainer. So a lot of work going on in that space. We have 6 or 7 new vehicles entered the depot in the last couple of weeks.
Yes,
So
wonderful.
I've had 3 new skip trucks, 2 new sidearm vehicles, another reload vehicle. So we've hired a few of these to bring us in to help us up as the new order that we ordered earlier in the year for the Volvos starts to come through. So from a fleet point of view, more in the yard. From a people point of view, more are coming. From a training point of view, we've got a new driver trainer. From a supply point of view, all the contracts are in place for the bin supply. So yeah, it's a lot going on. The growth is impactful on us, particularly at those times of Christmas.
Yep.
But overarchingly, trying to communicate as best as we can with the public, keep them informed. We've had some service interruptions that I'm not happy with, just in terms of wanting to deliver the best service. But we're trying our best to make sure that that's communicated at all times.
Lovely. Thank you, Mr McAllister. Thank you, Chair.
Any further questions from the committee? Councillor Johnny?
Thank you, Chair. So I understand the waste industry is transitioning quite rapidly at the moment, and we as a local government have that responsibility quite squarely on our shoulders to act in best practice in this regard. And your full-time employee numbers is around 100 in that sector?
Currently around 87, 88.
Yeah, so...
Looking into next year being closer to 98. So it's the driver pool increases, the driver trainers. So that is good to see it, in fact, keeping up with getting us up to demand.
Okay. And just from my personal experience, I would like to thank the team. I did order a skip over Christmas and it was placed within an inch of my brick wall as per my requests and picked up in a timely manner, and the service was wonderful. So with everything going on, the skills
Appreciate that.
of the team are still there. So yeah, if you could
Appreciate
pass that on, that would be great. Thank you.
I may have a different conversation with them about placing it within an inch of the wall, but that's
Any further questions? No. Thank you, Mr. McAllister. Mayor Harding?
I do have a question about the iVolve project on page 45 of the report.
All right.
I'm happy to take that question. I'm happy to take that question, Chair.
Thank you. I'm looking at the one that's obviously in red, where it says finalise the business case for the delivery of the iVolve project to implement a technology solution for council. I just wonder if I could get a bit of an update there and see what the organisation's doing to remediate that.
Thank you. Through Chair. So you'll note the commentary there, of course, in relation to that item. So I can confirm that the plan that was submitted that's referred to there that was awaiting key stakeholder and executive approval has been approved. The project control group is meeting weekly. We have meetings with general managers and members of ELT occurring in the coming fortnight. There is significant activity happening and a significant number of workshops occurring with subject matter experts across council. This Catalyst project is likely to remain red because we are, as we've noted, making up time towards our commitment to have the business case finalised by 30 June, and it is incredibly tight timeframe. So I sat in on the project control group meeting yesterday to observe, and together with the support of the Acting General Manager Corporate Services and working closely with the CIO, the Program Director and our Strategic Advisor, all for this project, we are monitoring certainly weekly, if not more frequently. Does that provide sufficient information at this stage?
Thank you, CEO. Thank you, Chair.
Any further questions for this matter today? That being the case, do any members of the committee wish to move the report be received and contents noted? Mayor Harding. Any seconder? Councillor Kunzelman. Any discussion today, committee?
I think if I may, Chair, I thought the report was really well prepared and easy to follow. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate the openness of the transparency. The organisation will never be green lights for everything, so I appreciate the honest reporting.
Thank you, Mayor. Any further discussion? I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour? That's unanimous and carried. We'll move on to the next item today, which is the revised Indigenous Accord policy. Do any members of committee have questions? Mayor Harding.
Good morning. Kat Matson, Manager of Economic and Community Development.
Thank you, Ms Matson. And through the Chair, I note the report says there are no financial resource implications. So I guess you can talk us through that. So there's some word changing. I know it's a new policy, but I think it's really important that we do have policy that's relevant and practical and real and does it and fits in. So I guess I'm seeking your guidance that this does that.
Thank you, Mayor. Through the Chair, this policy update is a contemporisation of an old policy. The old policy was well and truly out of date and old, and it hadn't incorporated the Indigenous Accord, for example. The old policy also hadn't been brought up to speed with TP9. So this policy update is quite an administrative process. It modernises our policy. It reflects our approach to our Indigenous engagement and to the Indigenous Accord. So, if you like, it's a reflection of what we've been doing as distinct to a new piece of work. So that's why there's no financial or resourcing implications.
Thank you. Has there been any consultation with traditional owners or any other groups on this revised policy?
Not in terms of the policy paper itself. However, it does build on the Indigenous Accord work that has been done and the anecdotal and casual engagement that we have with the Indigenous groups. But as I said, this is an administrative piece of work that ensures that our policy is updated and in line with TP9.
Right. will we be going out to any of the groups to let them know that the policy has changed or been updated, or what's the plan?
That wouldn't have been my plan, Mayor, given that it's a internal policy piece. However, there is a lot of work underway right now in terms of how we better engage with our local Indigenous groups under the Accord. So yeah, not per se, not on the policy per se, but definitely on how we engage in general.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms Matson.
All right. Any members of the committee willing to move this item this morning? Mayor Harding, seconded by Councillor Kunzelman. Any discussion? Mayor?
If I may, we've had a number of meetings with Indigenous groups and traditional owners, and one of the things they do say is that they do want to be very much involved in the process. So I look forward to us having closer relationships and working through and listening to the groups as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Any further discussion this morning? I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour? That's unanimous and carried. We'll move on to item 4 this morning, the boundary anomalies between Ipswich City Council and Lockyer Valley Regional Council. I myself actually have questions on this one this morning. I'm not sure who would like to field them.
Good morning, Mayor and Councillors. Kerry Perrott, Acting Property Manager.
Good morning to you too. The question that I have is in regards to the actual properties themselves. Do we consult those owners before making these recommendations, or do we leave that to the Change Commission? Because there's obvious rating impacts and those sorts of things.
Lockyer Valley Regional Council will be consulting with the property owners on this matter. We are just providing our support for Lockyer Valley to make application to the Change Commission.
So the property owners may not be aware of what we're discussing today.
No.
Thank you. That's all I wanted to know. Any further questions?
If I may, through the chair, if this does proceed through the Change Commission, I guess where does the council stand when it comes to rates? What are we gaining? What are we losing? What dollar figure?
That's a question for Jeff Keach.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Mayor and Councillors. Jeff Keach, Acting General Manager, Corporate Services. Just to take your question, Mayor.
Yes.
We're estimating at the moment, because obviously things will change depending on boundary realignments, valuations, but we expect the impact to be approximately about $1,500 in total. They're primary production properties.
$1,500 additional or less?
Decrease, because some of the properties going over to Lockyer.
Okay.
About 7% of one, and their primary production, so relatively low rates in that space. That's our estimate at the moment. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Thank you, Chair.
Yep. Anything else? Thank you.
Do any members of the committee wish to move these matters this morning? We'll do A through C in the one block. Councillor Milligan, seconded by Councillor Kunzelman. Any discussion?
No, but I do find that your question was very interesting, Chair. That this has been going on for some years. Yeah. That I think the residents would have been consulted at some stage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I myself personally don't know if that's a standard part of the process. I mean, the Change Commission is a pretty rigorous path to go through, so I don't think anything will happen without things being duly considered. So I didn't mean to suggest otherwise. But yeah, it's one of those oddities. Where you draw a line for a boundary of the city is something that fascinates me, because we have a number of split suburbs across the boundary of Division 1. And when you're out there, it's just like, what? So, yeah. Councillor Milligan.
So if I could just continue on, it may have been that Lockyer Valley Council have already contacted them. I don't know.
Councillor Milligan.
Thank you, Chair. It's, to me, quite clear and obvious that the main crux of this is that a local government boundary should not dissect a property. That's straightforward, simple, obvious. There will be, in terms of rateable revenue, between two LGAs, a winner and one that doesn't win. It's simple as that. And for the property owners, for their management moving forward, having all of their parcel of land contained within one LGA is clear and obvious. So that's my view of the matter, and I believe it should proceed.
I indeed concur, Councillor Milligan. I just had a couple of questions this morning. Any further discussion?
Just on
Councillor
behalf,
Johnny?
through the chair, on behalf of the property owners, even though they're not generally consulted at this time, their retrospective allowance for any rates paid during the time that this has been an issue, I think that would be something that they would probably need to discuss, or we should be mindful of, given the delay.
Thank you, Councillor Johnnick. Any further discussion this morning? I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour of the recommendations? That's unanimous and carried. We'll move on to...
Chair, may I move a procedural motion for an adjournment for 30 minutes, please?
You may. I'll put that to the vote for an adjournment for 30 minutes. Those in favour? That's unanimous and carried. We'll be back at 10:31. All right, we'll get back into it, everyone. We're on to item 5 this morning, the new lease over part of 125A Chubb Street, 1 mile to Westmoreland Greyhound Owners and Trainers Association Incorporated. Do any members of the committee have questions on this matter this morning? Nobody has any questions. Do any members of the committee wish to move it? We've got 3 recommendations. So would anybody like to move A through C? Councillor Milligan, seconded by Councillor Johnnick. Any discussion this morning from the committee? All right. Yeah, you may.
Thank you, Chair. I will vote against this. I realise we are voting only on a lease, not the greyhound racing industry in general. I realise also that we are being asked to continue an existing arrangement, not formalising a new arrangement. I simply cannot agree with dogs being forced to run around a track, nor do I agree with the associated gambling culture. However, I realise that there is no chance I can convince the rest of the world of the cruelty in this activity. Also, I recognise that this lease is only one small part of a whole industry that seems to meet with the general approval of the public and the government. Given these considerations, I have only one course open to me and will vote against the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Kunzelman. Do any other members of the committee wish to discuss the matter this morning? That being said, I'll put the recommendations to the vote. Those in favour of adopting. That's myself, Councillor Madsen, Councillor Johnnick, Mayor Harding, Councillor Doyle and Councillor Milligan. And those against? Councillor Kunzelman. The motion is carried and passed. Well, the recommendations, I should say. We'll move on to our next matter this morning, item 6, the acquisition of easement for Hain Street Drainage Project. Do any members of the committee have questions in relation to this matter? No, we've got the one recommendation. Do any members of the committee wish to move it? Councillor Doyle, seconded by Mayor Harding. Any discussion this morning from the committee? There being no discussion, I will put the matter to the vote. Those in favour of accepting the recommendation? It's unanimous and carried. Item 7 this morning, which I will have in front of me in a second. There we go. Acquisition of land for road purposes for Kings Road Rosewood Bridge replacement. Are there any questions from the committee this morning on this matter? There being no questions, would any members of the committee like to move recommendations A through D? Councillor Doyle, seconded by Councillor Milligan. Any discussion this morning on this matter? Mayor Harding?
Just, Chair, it's great to see this happen. It's we have a number of residents looking at Councillor Milligan, Councilman, as you know, who are looking for this bridge to be upgraded. So, yeah, fully support this particular report.
Thank you, Mayor. Any further discussion on this matter? I will put the matter to the vote. Those in favour of recommendations A through D, that's unanimous and carried. That moves us along to item 8 this morning, the Procurement Contract Organic Waste Management Services. I myself have some questions on this matter. We'll await Councillor Johnnick leaving in line with her declaration. Yes, I myself have some questions to ask that require us going into closed session. They're about things within the tender consideration plan. So I'll move that we go into closed session. Those in favour? Does it need a seconder, actually? I've never moved anything into closed session.
I think it's a procedural
No, it's
motion.
procedural. Yeah, all right. I'll put it to the vote. That's unanimous and carried. We'll await. back online, everyone. If we wanted to make our questions of Mr. McAllister, that we can in open session. Who would like to ask questions?
If I might, Chair. Thank you, Mr. McAllister. Obviously, this is one that we've had a great deal of discussion in closed session. And I guess my question is to you that in the marketplace, is there anywhere in southeast Queensland that's doing invested composting?
Current operation at Yatala, run by Phoenix Energy. They did not tender in this process, so
they didn't tender.
They were not part of the process, and my knowledge also says they're pretty much running at capacity already.
Right. So every compliant bid was open windrow?
Every compliant bid was assessed as per the process.
My other question is, noting the compliance issues that have happened in the past, what are you doing, what's the organisation doing to ensure that the operator performs as for the contract, but also complies? What will you be doing?
So we have a strong key result area and key performance indicator matrix in our contract, and we will be managing very closely to that matrix in the contract, and we are acutely aware of their history and performance, and it definitely came into the tender assessment process. And so, as is always the case with individuals, we'll have a close eye on how they work, particularly around the timeframes that they've proposed to move to technologies and ensuring they're meeting what they've put forward as part of their process.
As far as I know, there's a number of non-compliances with that particular operator at the moment?
The operator operates under a temporary environmental plan from the state, so the state governs their environmental output, and the state is also holding them to very strict criteria to improve that situation, to which we sort of piggyback along on.
Sorry, through the chair, and apologies, Mayor, but while we're on this specific point, are you able to give us an update or any intel on given that we're, I guess, relying on the state to talk to them and work through compliance? Are we relatively happy with the steps they've taken to ensure compliance?
Not overly my space, to be honest. I'll get an honest answer. Brett Davey is probably the best person because he's the one having the direct conversation with the state. And I know that's a cooperation with the ODA task force and all those other aspects of that operation as well. As a general comment, they are actively moving through this technology to address their compliance issues as per their requirements from the state.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mayor.
Thank you. I guess, Mr. Smith, I look at the definition of insanity of, keep doing the same but expecting a different result. And I guess I'd like to know from you specifically how you're going to manage the performance and compliance. What is going to be different? How do we know that's going to happen?
I think from a difference to, say, some of my other larger contractors, there will be definitely more a key focus in ensuring that this is a defined weekly, monthly process, that we're getting constant updates, both from a construction of the facility point of view and a general operation point of view. My officers are engaged with Newgrow on a general basis nearly every day anyway, as we work through the organics trial at this point in time, but in general, as a major part of our operation, but definitely moving forward, because organics is such a key strategy for us, it has to become a focal point of my business.
And obviously we're not, council's not the only customer for this operator. Do you know what percentage Ipswich City Council is of the operator's business?
I think we are approximately 10 to 15% of total feedstock into the facility. You have other large feeds from, say, Brisbane Council, plus a large amount of commercial material coming in. They are also, through this process of their engagement with the state, actively reducing some of their liquid intake feed, and it's that liquid intake feed that actually is some of the very odorous materials. The organics process that we send to them is actually not a very odorous part of that mix. It is the paunch and the other stuff that comes out of places like JBS that can be really quite odorous.
Any further questions from the committee for Mr McAllister this morning?
Maybe not Mr, well, sorry, thank you, Chair, apologies. Maybe it crosses both Mr McAllister and Mr White. So I guess it's a general legal contract type question, but does speak to the commercial aspects of it, which you know too well, Mr McAllister. So I guess
We'll bring forward Mr White and they can both sort of make a call between them.
Richard White, Manager of Procurement.
thank you. As everybody knows, the biggest problem we have at this council and for our constituents is odour, dust, and they are compliance matters. And as we're continually told, we have very limited options as a council to combat that. A lot of the compliance issues sit with the state to monitor odour. We have limited options under our planning scheme, so height, size, and if they're not in breach of that, then, you know. So I guess we then, I guess if we turn our mind to the commerciality of it, that is where we can really get leverage. And whilst it may not be compliance, but that's our opportunity to get good outcomes for our residents. So I guess, do you see our contractual arrangements and our precedents through compliance able to go through some change? Should they be reviewed for the waste industry space to look at what levers we can pull? Very limited on the compliance, but if we can hit them hard on the commercial terms. This is a very lucrative industry. Everybody knows that. And we ask them to sharpen their pencil and go through these tender processes. But I would just ask from a legal point of view, I guess, that we look to our contracts and try and include some additional levers.
I would agree that we're doing this in two ways. So the first is, you'll note that the term of this contract, and it's been discussed, I believe, in the open session, that this is a shorter term contract with a view for a longer term strategy.
Great.
So the commerciality of this is and I don't want to say more of the same, but it is sort of, it is certainly a holding while we prepare to go to a larger outcome. And that much more commercial offer that we will take will give us the opportunity to have much more levers. And as you'll note, the best way you can hit is financially. That's where people are thinking mostly. So the best ways we can do that is to offer a very longer term, larger contract that we have much more financial levers within. And that is a better attractive offer to the market that they can then want to be a partner in delivery of. So at the moment, yes, we're improving our contract management. We're doing tighter control of our contracts within council than what we previously did. And this contract will be seen as a good
Key
refocus. And well, we've got a new contract terms and updated terms. Let's start the contract from here. It is a short-term contract. You know, we're talking 2 to 4 years here. It's a short-term contract looking at a much longer-term game. So the next time, maybe much more.
If I can add to Mr White's comments, the goal here is, in essence, is a transition. And what we've asked for specifically in this contract is a technology change. And that's the conversation we've been having regularly about the shift of technology to address the problem. So this is, in essence, we are first cab off the rank, but the rest of the councils are very close behind us in driving this behaviour. The state, as we just previously discussed off session, has set out a best practice guideline for this type of activity in the state and created a new ERA, an environmentally relevant activity, right? So we have piggybacked to that guideline, and it's less than 6 months old. So we're pushing the technology, and then as we move into the larger scale contract, we'll be pushing the volume to achieve those financial benefits or that long-term financial assurity of these services. It must be said, though, that as we push this technology, it is that paradigm shift of cost to achieve that outcome that we are starting to see come through. As we did discuss earlier in the day, this is impacting the bottom line, and this will continue to impact the bottom line until it creates a new paradigm. So we're at a very distinct transitional phase across lots of aspects of the waste industry.
Thank you, and that's great work, obviously, that you're undertaking to transition our contracts. I just want to reiterate that this is our opportunity, and we must, in my view, not miss this opportunity to open up opportunities to enforce performance. And as discussed in closed session, which wasn't really confidential, Councillor Milligan and I talked about other industry contracts, for instance, building contracts, where they may impose a financial penalty for non-performance. These are the only options potentially available to us as council. So I think it's critical that we start to explore with our legal team those levers.
Very much.
Thank you.
Any further questions this morning from the committee? Thank you, Mr. McAllister and Mr. White. As it's a procurement matter, I'd suggest moving recommendations A through C. Do any members of the committee wish to move those recommendations? Councillor Doyle, seconded by Councillor Kunzelman. Any discussion this morning on the matter? Mayor Harding.
Thank you, Chair. I guess in discussion, I look at what's publicly available. I can see that Newgra have a new website which goes into some detail on what they're doing the next 12 months and the DA, the development application that they've put in. And I do know that they are putting in a significant capital investment program. They're going to, by December, so they claim, enclose the liquid deposition bay, operating under negative pressure to capture odours. They're going to be building 12 forced aeration in-vessel composting tunnels, as well as biofilters designed to capture and neutralise odours, as well as upgrade leachate, stormwater drains, sumps and dams. I see that, but I guess I always keep coming back to how do we make sure that this is going to happen? And just really aware, I live in Raceview and I smell it. So I'm just really aware of what's happening to residents in that area. And I guess I reiterate to the organisation how important it is to make sure that if this contract does proceed, the importance of the performance, but also the compliance obligations of this contract.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Doyle.
Thank you, Councillor Madsen, Chair. I just want to, I guess, concur with the Mayor's comments, but the other side of the coin is, I guess, and I know others share the disappointment, I guess, that there wasn't a number of or a lot more players in the space coming forward that could offer a really good product that will be a positive change for residents in Ipswich. But I guess we just have to have faith that in the coming years standards will improve across these players. And competition is important in any industry. It drives up standards and down prices. So.
Absolutely.
Chair, it sort of feels like that the needs of our community is far ahead of the market. The market needs to catch up to what the expectations are and what needs to happen in the waste industry.
I concur. Anybody else from the committee? In closing, I would just offer my own sort of thoughts in that I represent a number of the communities affected by organic composting in Ipswich. For me, I'm the same as them. I'll only be satisfied when they're not impacted by odours at their household, because I think that that's a completely reasonable thing to expect in what we consider a first world country. I would actually say that in any country, you should have a house where there's clean air, and that's what I'm motivated for. And I would, as the committee chair, just say that my whole time here at council, all councillors have been pursuing that. We all do believe that. I reject any assertion otherwise. And at the same side, with the CEO beside me, a lot of our officers are motivated in ensuring the same things. Ideally, it wouldn't be one of those things that we're talking about, but this is what we're here to do, to ensure a quality of life for our community. And I think we will get to the bottom of it. We'll certainly keep working on it, and yeah, I think that'll do. I'll put the recommendations to the vote. Those in favour? That's unanimous and carried. We'll move on to our next item today, when Councillor Jonik returns. Welcome back, Councillor Jonik. Had quite a deliberation on that last matter. I'll give you a moment as I read out the matter we're up to. We're up to item 9 on today's agenda, Procurement Geographic Information System Enterprise Spatial Solution. Do any members of the committee have questions on this matter? Councillor Kunzman? CEO?
Apologies, Chair. Mr. White would like to make a clarification with some reflection in relation to this matter and the recommendations that sit there in the interests of greater transparency. So I'm glad that Mr. White was called up. Thank you.
Mr. White, Richard White, Manager of Procurement. Sorry, I've heard Mr. White so much. It's been a while since I was teaching. I would like to, I don't know how I say, if we could remove recommendation C and D regarding essentially seeking your endorsement or your recommendation to approve the contract. I believe we should wait till we have a contract agreed with a contract price and come back to you at a date that we have that agreed price and contract. In earnest, we were hoping to have that approved to progress it as quickly as possible on a budget amount, but I believe for most transparency, we should bring that back to you as either committee or council, depending on timing for the contract. So that sort of requesting that we vary what we've put to you. Sort of on reflection, felt that it's probably actually best, and then on discussion afterwards with the city solicitor. What's the most transparent approach for this? We don't often put these up, so it's a bit of a how best to do it.
All right. Well, we haven't had a mover yet, so I'm happy for that to be the standing matter. Councillor Kunzman, you had a question for Mr. White?
I'm not trying to trick you up or anything. It says, when we're talking about risk assessment, as council changes infrastructure, there is a risk the new environment could be compromised. Is that a capacity issue?
Can I take that on notice? I won't try and come with an answer to that. That sounds like a technical question that I want to get to the best answer.
Are we happy to have that reported back for our ordinary meeting after today?
Thank you.
Is that sufficient?
Yes, that's good.
Thank you.
Any further questions for Mr. White? Thank you.
Thank you.
So we've had some advice to proceed with just recommendations A and B this morning. Do any members of committee wish to move those? Mayor Harding, seconder, Councillor Doyle. Any discussion this morning? Mayor Harding.
I just welcome council to move it away from a customised bespoke system to an open GIS system. It's wonderful to see.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor?
Just referring to the risk assessment, I have to say I'm very impressed with the range of risk assessment in this contract. Thank you.
May we pass on through the CEO those comments?
Noted and will be passed on. Thank you.
Thank you. That being said, we'll put recommendation A and B to the vote. Those in favour this morning, that's unanimous and carried. We'll move along to item 10, another procurement matter for Intergraph spatial software maintenance. Do any members of committee have questions on this matter? We have a recommendation A and B. Would any members of committee like to move those together? Mayor Harding, seconded by Councillor Kunzelman. Any discussion this morning on this matter? There being no discussion, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour of the recommendations, that's unanimous and carried. We're on to our last item for today's agenda, a procurement matter regarding Rebel Domain Parklands facility lease. Do we have any questions for the relevant officer? Councillor Johnnick, Mayor Harding. Seek your advice, CEO, on who the relevant officer in the room is on that one.
Chair, it'll depend on the nature of the questions. Are they about the procurement or more about the actual Parklands facility?
About the procurement.
It's Mr. White again.
Richard White, Manager of Procurement.
Thank you, Mr. White. Through the chair, I just was looking at the weighting of the evaluation criteria. Oh, sorry. Is it okay if we
Yeah, that would be confidential.
go into a closed session?
Would you like to propose the procedural motion, or shall I?
I propose a procedural motion that we go into closed session.
Those in favour? That's unanimous and carried. Okay, just as a sort of clarity for those at home, we've had a discussion in closed session about some matters in the tender consideration plan, and councillors are seeking more information. We've proposed that we move it to the council meeting, and at the council meeting we'll deliberate on a path forward once we have that information. Do the committee members agree with that as a path, as a general rule? Just for clarity, because if we move A and B, well, we can actually move that the committee has no recommendation and that it be considered at the council meeting. That's probably a better path. So I'll propose that. I'll move that this report be referred to the council meeting for deliberations once more information is provided to councillors. Would anybody like to second that? Councillor Johnick. Any discussion? We'll just give Vicky a chance to type that out because I said it pretty quickly. Yep, I'm happy with that. We're all happy with that? All right. I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? That's unanimous and carried. That's our last item for today, so I'll declare the meeting closed at 11:44. Seek some advice in regards to the start of the next meeting because it's near lunch.
Lunch at noon? Yep, break for lunch.
Yeah, I'd go to the next meeting will start at 12:30. Is everyone happy with that?